Welcome. Ryan Castle here, the CEO of the Cape Cod and Island Association of Realtors, and I'm here with our Government Affairs Director, Leslie Sandberg. Thanks, Leslie, for joining us today.
Thanks, Ryan.
We want to talk today about what's happening at Fall Town Meeting and kind of walk you through some of the issues we're tracking in your town and what we're working on holistically around the Cape. And so we'll start with a little bit, Leslie, about kind of what we look at. So at the government affairs side of the advocacy side of the association, we have really a public policy guide that kind of sets the framework for the issues we look at.
Absolutely.
And where the Cape Cod and Island Association Realtor stands on those issues, because there's the same issues that happen time and time again. And rather than continue to look at, have to decide where we stand each time it comes up, we kind of have standing policies. And so that all follows in our public policy guide. And we've made some recent additions to that public policy guide by adding a session on building codes, for instance, like the specialized in energy building codes. But how does that process work? How does the Public Policy Committee and the whole thing work? It's about putting together a policy plan.
Thanks for asking. I mean, Ryan, what we find is that it usually something bubbles up from our membership, whether it's, for instance, I'll take the example, the stretch code. The stretch code was changing and becoming more stringent, if you will, and people wanted to know what was it all about. They didn't know. So they said, hey, you know what, enough people don't know. We really need to look at it, research it, and then build a policy around it. So what we did at the Public Policy Committee is that we actually had speakers come, and they were from both sides of the issue. Those who are pro-stretch code and talk about the benefits, those that are worried about the stretch code getting more restrictive and saying how, the cost problems and the grid problems with that. We went through that. We talked amongst ourselves, and then we also talked with other people. We spoke with you. And from that, we were able to come down with a policy that actually everybody was comfortable with and could represent the policy that we want appropriately, and then we asked the board of directors to take a look at it, and you can take it from there,
it, right? And that's the whole thing. It ultimately comes down to the board, but it starts at that committee level.
Yeah.
And it starts with you guys getting research and hearing opinions from a lot of different people, and kind of saying, where do realtors stand on this based on our guiding principles of what we stand for, which is really the preamble to the code of ethics of being a realtor. So with that, you kind of see that whole guides of the Public Policy Committee role, the board director's role, and our policy guide that really then, once we have a policy guide, it allows you and I to actually get to work.
Exactly.
And actually allows us to contact and talk to, members of the select boards or planning boards or whatever, or staff, and say, hey guys, have y'all considered this? And it really helps inform us about the realtor's take on the issue by that kind of process through the Public Policy Committee. So I think that's a really important segment there. And so also on the main issues we look at, right? The last couple of years, they've been the same kind of issues.
Yes.
And really, we have really focused our policy efforts around 4 big issues, which is number one is bridge replacement. It's not necessarily a local issue, but our members have said this over and over. Our leadership has said this over and over. Bridge replacement and better access to Cape Cod is probably our biggest number one realtor issue right now, from the standpoint of how making sure we can do everything we can to move that forward. Another big issue that we are tackling on a daily basis is zoning reform and housing affordability issues, right? I think we all know the Cape has gotten more expensive. So how do we move forward on pushing zoning reform, pushing housing affordability, housing production issues, and moving forward that way? A big one component, because of once again, the preamble to the Code of Ethics talks about this, protection of private property rights.
Yes.
And how does that stuff that comes up, whether it's rental restrictions or whether it's building issues or what building code issues, everything. How does it impact the private property rights of property owners?
Correct.
And then the last is a really Cape Cod specific thing, which is clean water infrastructure. This goes so much hand in hand with our housing affordability issue, but it's also our long-standing last several years campaign we've had about Realtors for Clean Water, about not only advocating for mechanisms like watershed permits and sewer infrastructure to move clean water forward, but also educating our members about the clean water infrastructure and some of the nuances that are coming out of there. So that's kind of some of our, I think, our longstanding policy issues.
Absolutely. And again, I think what people need to know with a public policy guide, it's a living, breathing guide, and it changes as issues come up. But also it helps us use that lens of, when we're looking at a public policy issue, is how would our members look at it? What do we need to do to be helpful for our members in advocating for this?
And that's why the public policy committee is so important, right?
Yeah.
And that's where they're looking at this stuff on a monthly basis, formulating it, giving us insight, opinions, that sort of thing.
And we've got a really good committee. And if anybody ever wants to join it, you'll always be welcome.
Absolutely. Wellfleet has their town meeting coming up October 21st at 6 p.m., Leslie.
Yep.
It's at Wellfleet Elementary School at 100 Lawrence Road.
Yep.
What can you tell me about the article that we saw that really was the most relevant to our members to think about as they go to town meeting?
You got it. I looked at the warrant, and what I found was Article 17, and that's funding for the 95 Lawrence wastewater treatment facility. This is money this is an ongoing project that they're getting funding for. And the article says, they want to authorize borrowing from the Clean Water state revolving fund. So to do that, the town must vote to appropriate the following funding to receive a $3 million MassWorks grant for the project. So basically they're asking for the town to appropriate $3 million just to have it so that they can then go get a grant. And so it's a very interesting thing. You have to have the appropriation before you can get the grant in some of these instances. So this $3 million appropriation is in addition to $2.6 million appropriation already approved in 2023. And that makes a total of $5.6 million for design, permitting, construction, and equipment for the wastewater facility.
Good. I mean, towns need to invest in that clean water infrastructure. So anything that they can do to do that is very helpful, especially for a town like Wellfleet, who is trying to figure out how to move forward with their watershed permit and how to kind of move that forward, which they need to do. And we want to figure out how to help them do that in the best way possible. And so I'm really glad that they're moving forward on their wastewater plans.
Yeah, it's great. And sewering is the best way to get the most nitrogen out of the waterways.
Absolutely. It is. It's tough in some areas on the Cape, like especially the rural areas like Wellfleet.
Exactly.
And so you're going to have to supplement it with other things. And that's where we're constantly working on what those rules look like going forward.
Yeah. Wellfleet's doing a good job. Thank you.